We have an interesting topic that's there out on the screen that's changing the game through data analytics. And we have a wonderful panelist here. I would like to introduce, starting from far right, Sandy Peppenfuss. She's the SVP from Consumer Lending from First Tech. And right next to Sandy is Dave Ulrich. So Dave is the Senior Director of Credit Analytics. And right next to Dave is Robin Held. Robin is the VP of Mortgage Operations from First Tech again. And we have Dale Dabas, who's visiting us from Spokane. And he's the R&D strategist. And right next to Dale is, if I got the name right, Juan. Juan from Partners Credit Union. You're the Chief Data Analytics Officer.
Correct. Yep.
And then right next to Juan is Andre. Andre is from Public Service Credit Union. And he's more focused on the member success and marketing, research, public service. Great to have all of you. I think as we had this session in the morning, when Mike started off the introductory, the keynote, as many saw that, there's so much of traction in terms of all the data and analytics. So there's a much more reverence here at this point, in a sense that there's more relevance to bringing all this different data and analytics together. There's every organization is looking at it at different levels, at different maturity cycles. So I think from a credit union standpoint, I think there are many of us here in the audience who would be very much interested to learn how they can leverage some of the information that you guys would share today in the panel. So starting off, the format is more like I'll have some general questions that I would ask all the panelists. And then once the session is over, then we'll turn over to the audience for questions after 30 minutes. Yep. So one of the key questions that comes up is how has data helped in your 2 years? I would start with Sandy.
Thank you. Again, I oversee all of our consumer lending activities, and where data helped me, I'm going to just focus on one of the number one priorities, and what I'll call wins for us, was building out a regional risk-based pricing, auto loan pricing methodology and models. So we have 11 regions now, and we have different risk-based pricing for each of those regions. And the data analysis behind it, to be frank, when we started, we pretty much just looked at the market and said, okay, who's our competitors? What are they doing? Where do we want to be compared to the competitors? Which is not very sophisticated at all, when we really should be focused on profitability for that given portfolio, that risk tier, and then adding on the market. So we used our own data and a lot of analytics to determine what our risks were for the different product types in the different geographical regions for the different tiers, and then developed out a model for that. And then on a monthly basis, we now use all of our surveys, and we get lots of pricing surveys to determine should we make changes to any of those regions or all of those regions or just portions of each tier for a given region. So we got a lot more sophisticated. It feels a lot more comfortable from a business standpoint. We also use data to say, are we hitting the ROE target that we have for portfolios? Again, slicing down all the way rather than just saying auto, but for A+ auto in Oregon, for example. Are we achieving what we wanted to achieve? So there's one big example of our use of data in the last 2 years, where I don't think it would have been conceivable maybe 5-10 years ago to get that sophisticated.
Dave, you want to share from your standpoint? I mean, I know when you just joined last year, you wanted to get straight away into the data databases and start looking at the data much more closely. So how does it help in your area in credit analytics?
So I'm primarily in the back office. So for me, when I started, like Mike was saying in his keynote, I was predisposed to data. You didn't have to sell me about data warehouse. So when I joined, the workflow, we would have our monthly business review meetings and things like that. Our workflow was all Excel spreadsheets here, Access database there, blend all this together, and we were the 90% prep, 10% analyze group. And I think for us, just centralizing and standardizing the data that we knew we were already using enabled us to basically increase our output by fourfold while decreasing the amount of time we spent by about half. So, when you talk about doing more with less, just having the data structured in a way that is easy to query and easy to get to is, for me, a fantastic win. And so, the team is able to now focus more on areas of potential risk to the credit union, which is our fundamental job. So,
Robin?
Okay, so I'll let you hang on to that one. I would say in mortgage sales and ops, we hadn't really taken advantage of what analytics could provide us until just this last year when we brought in our own analyst. Prior to that, it was the credit and the underwriting risk analysis that was coming in to us. But since then, we've recognized all the benefits that can come with y'all. One, I think Navina mentioned the Tableau reporting that's done, and that tells us, from a production dynamics perspective, how is this application flowing through each stage? Where are the hang-ups? Where is it flowing smoothly? Where is it stalling? And based by region, is it then the region in sales or the region in processing? And it helps us to identify where are those pitfalls that we need to address and find alternatives for. So that's the use that we've taken so far. The potentials are huge. I can tell you that we have over 400,000 members, and my impact is in the single digits as to how many of those members have a first mortgage with me. So I have a huge quantity of people that I need to go out there and address. And the only way I'm going to do that successfully is through the use of the analytics and the data that comes from that. I don't know yet, and this is why, thank God, I have an analyst, how to attack that. I just know where I want to go, and I'm going to trust him to get me there. But I would say that's my big rock on the horizon, or one of 22 probably. But yeah, there's that one.
Great, thanks. I think, Dale, if just quick, 2 seconds, if you can just share.
Sure. In Spokane, it's our first application of analytics is really member-facing, and we dove in head first. This is what not to do. We dove in head first and took about 40 products and services and tried to feed our frontline employees with best product conversations to have with our members. But goodness, it won a lot of awards, that program, and got a lot of headlines. But it was too complex for our employees. So we took a lessons learned, and we're right now in the process of dramatically simplifying the model of how we approach our members, and really simplifying it down to really just 3 conversations. Which of these 3 conversations is really appropriate for the member in front of us? Is it do we need to win your checking business, your transaction business? Do we need to help you secure a better savings platform, a reserve in case something goes sideways? Or do we need to help you manage your credit a little better? And depending on which of those things, it's a solution that we're implementing now, and hopefully it's one that the front line can engage much better and drive even better results to our membership.
So, Juan, in your company, how do you? I know you do a lot of data analytics as well. So quickly, I think in terms of what are the things that's much more compelling for the members in your credit union?
Yeah, I think I would echo a lot of the comments that have been made so far. I think we don't have there's no lack of data. We have plenty of data, right? And I think so when I came on board, since I've been in the role for almost a year now, the biggest challenge is how do we bring all this data together? How do we make sense of it, right? That was the main thing. Is each department had good, quote unquote, analytics and good data. I mean, good analysis and good data, mostly Excel-based, mostly Access database-based, but it's the silos, right? It's how do you break the silos and to bring the data together and make sense of it from a holistic perspective. And so there's two main barriers we had to break. One was the notion of each department head thinking that their own department was special and there was no overlap with the other departments. And we were able to prove quantitatively that there's significant amount of overlap between each department in the business process and the data elements they need. And the second thing is also shifting the conversations from the business teams, from my customers or my internal customers from, it's all about just reports. It's not about that. As Naveen said this morning, it's about insights, right? It's about, what are you trying to accomplish with this data? What are you trying to do with it, right? And that immediately allows you to prioritize, allows you to go after the low-hanging fruit. So, and all, I think Michael mentioned this morning, it's all about, member experiences, right? How do we provide personalized and customized member experiences? And that's what, again, I like one of the points that Michael made this morning about, the segment they serve puts a lot of pressure in terms of the technology expectations. We serve the Walt Disney Company employees, right? So imagine what that puts in terms of guest experience expectations to us, right? We serve the cast members that provide excellent guest experience, so we have to provide that to those employees as well, right? So that's in a quick sort of overview what we're trying to accomplish and how do we bring data together to provide better member experiences. Is that?
Thank you. So in your area, Andre, I know you just before this session, I know you were kind of mentioning your usage of the analytics slightly different, although I think it could be branded as different names. So can you share, what exactly is it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, is there any Brazilians? Are there any Brazilians around here? Nice to meet you. I'm from Brazil, São Paulo. So it's a pleasure.
Mario.
I knew he was here. I knew I saw your name. I thought that must be Portuguese or Brazilian. There you go. So, tudo bem, right. So anyway, the story of our credit union is a little bit different, right? We're from Denver. People tended to think a little bit different than other places, very creative. So what we did is we thought, okay, we have all this data. So we have this word called business intelligence, which, in my opinion, is market research rebranded. That's how I see business intelligence in my mind. I was hired 10 years ago to create the market research business unit. We have all kinds of intelligence there already interpreted, where you don't need to look at the report. You look at the data already. You answer questions like, okay, who should we target? How do you do that? When do you do that? Where do you do that? What do you sell to those people, to those members, to be effective on your endeavor? So what we did is, okay, there was a change in leadership, because market research was not very valuable to the organization in the beginning. With this new leadership, around 8 months ago, they said we need to connect members and the data. So I was given an opportunity to create a member success department that we call. So on this department, what we did is we designed a full outbound program, okay, where my staff, I have a staff of 6 people, and they reach out to the member, either via private message, social media, direct marketing, outbound calling, you name it. And obviously we follow the regulations because there is some compliances, we need to respect. Now we think, okay, so what does it have to do with predictive analytics? Think about this. Predictive analytics value for us is on target marketing. When you predict what the member is going to do next, you calculate anticipated demand of that specific target. You ask yourself, okay, what are the elements, right, the statistical elements that drive member behavior? It's nice to track what members tell you and their intention, but it's really on the behavior. So we have that in market research. So what we did is we connected the target marketing piece of predictive analytics to the outbound program, and we're able to be successful. So I truly calculate ROI, meaning I have from my executive salary included on the ROI, my team's salary included on the ROI, my salary, everybody's salary, and the profit that specific campaign is bringing and the product. And we calculate the ROI. So as of now, we're able to have an average of a 5%, 5.25% ROI, which means that every time we go to the CEO, we need one more person. It's like, there you go.
So I can have that.
You got one. You got
I got it. So I think the other thing is, like, when we start talking about data, I mean, there's so many different types of data that comes into the picture now. I mean, especially in this new digital world, I think we come across multiple channels of data streaming in. And I just wanted to go with Dave first. I think, Dave, what do you see are the different types of data that we would be needing to use? What are we using?
So for the credit analytics that I'm doing, I mean, fundamentally the data is from the core system, the financials. It's been interesting to talk to different folks here, and I really love the breadth of all the different experiences that people are bringing to this conference. And some folks are very mature, and some folks are less mature on this data journey. And for me, just to start with, just having month-end core reports at a loan level was where we started. And then marrying that with the loan origination system data was probably the very first place we had to start. And then layer on top of that some external data, credit scores, AVMs, things like that, to kind of keep track of where the credit concentration risks are in our portfolio. And then I think for me, the next step that I'm looking for over the next couple of quarters is really interacting with our collections and special asset management group, and kind of really getting a lot more of a stranglehold, if you will, in terms of that data, not just month-end, but really daily data, to really see where the different parameters are in terms of delinquency rates and things like that. So those are probably the main data sources I'm using right now in my day-to-day job.
Do you guys think it's the same in consumer lending too, Sandy, in terms of different data sources? Is there any external data sources that that you guys plan to use or currently using?
Yeah, currently, mostly what Dave talked about there, where we want to go, or what I'm saying where I want to go, is twofold. One, we haven't married or brought the data, for example, in the mortgage arena or the commercial together with the consumer. So understanding the insights, that's where I want to go, because I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of connections and a lot of learnings we can take from that, bringing all those data elements together, including the online. We have the stuff, and I'm going to talk in layman's terms, how long they were on the website and how long they stayed on a particular product page and where they went from one product page to the next product page. So I'm anxious to see that data brought in and married with what we already know. And then external data, I'm going to, again, kind of talk from the business standpoint. I'm presented continually, weekly, from lots of external providers, whether it's the bureaus or someone selling something, and it's extremely expensive. And it's always one-shot purpose. Whatever they're selling it to you for is the one thing you can use it for. And I want us to find a way to make really good choices of what we buy and bring in, and then how to use it, external data sources. So I don't have the answer, but that's where I want to go, because there is so much data out there around people and behavior, and but haven't figured out how to do that yet.
So I think I'll turn that question to Juan. I mean,
do you mind?
I don't.
As they were talking, the thing that came to mind is that one of the biggest transformations we've done, I've been trying to do over the last year, is the conversation with my peers needs to shift from data and data sources to insights they're trying to generate and to business questions that they're trying to answer, right? It was interesting because when I started, a lot of the conversations with my boss, my peers, was about, I wish I could measure this, but I know we don't have that data, and I wish we could measure that, but I know Symetra doesn't track that data. I said, why are we talking about that? Why are we talking in source system terms, right? The conversation needs to be elevated to the questions and the insights. It has to be completely system agnostic, and actually from those conversations, when we have gaps, is that we actually go back to my IT counterpart, and the CTO and the CIO, and say, hey, this has value. We need to start tracking this and start, capturing this data because it's important, right? And in those conversations, there've been a lot of things that have come up that say, okay, this is important to measure because this answering this business question has this business value, will drive this insight. Let's go after that. So that's how we're approaching guiding the additional data sources. I mean, we're fortunate that because we exclusively serve the Walt Disney Company, we have access to tons of data from our market base. But again, there were no good reasons to go after it besides just I want to see it. So having a conversation about if I give you this, what are you going to do with it, right? And what are the actions you're going to take with it is key to make sure that you go after the right data sets and bring them in.
Right. I'll ask Dale. So do you see any such kind of needs that come up at Spokane? Like, we need this kind of information, external information, but then what exactly are we going to use it? I mean, is there any such scenarios? You want to pass that? Do you mind again?
Yes. The challenge, at least for our marketplace, is, our challenge is a little different than some of the others. We come from an area that's less well-to-do. Over half of our members are in the bottom 2 quintiles. So we're dealing with income-constrained members. Some of you may be too. And so the challenge there is how can we use data to improve their outcomes, make them more or encourage greater financial resiliency. That's data that we don't have natively, but we have to form a partnership with our members to say, trust us with your information, and we'll use it we'll curate it and find the best solutions to encourage good outcomes. We all want to be able to bounce back after a setback, or we want to be able to, survive income or expense shocks. In that marketplace, it's especially challenging for folks. So that's a data source that's hard for us to get our arms around. We only have a piece of their pie, and so we have to work with them to help model out those successful strategies. The other area, very quickly, is using BI to enhance the actual products that we offer. We're less interested in trying to outguess what the member wants, although that's a great enterprise. We're more interested in baking business intelligence right into the products, whether that's an insights checking account that goes beyond just giving you a month-end statement, but gives you context around whether you're getting ahead or falling behind, some kind of a context for members to understand the data that we're delivering at the end of the month, or a mobile app that understands your transaction recurrence and offers the transaction you're likeliest to need to do today right on the front screen and saves you however many clicks diving down. So that's the context for us taking data and trying to deliver it both through smarter products, less commodity products, and also to solve just kind of the economic challenges of our area.
So one other thing, I want to transition slightly in a different topic, which I think that came up in the earlier session with Mike. I think one of the questions was around how do you balance these needs if the analytics team is just a very small group, and then how are you really addressing all the needs in your own respective areas? So I think I just want to maybe start with Robin. In terms of meeting some of the needs, how would you see that taking shape as we go in the future?
Constantly improving. as I mentioned, one of the things about a credit union is they operate lean, so we don't tend to overstaff with analysts. We all wear 5 hats for one job. So, again, we had one analyst that just started with us, so we have nothing but improvement to go in from here on out. Lots of opportunity. It will, like I said, I've got so many lists of things, of recommendations of how I want to utilize the data, where we can go next. To Sandy's point, do we want to go external? We've got so much information at our own hands already. I don't see the need for that yet. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but again, everything's great for me going forward because I'm starting with nothing.
So, do you concur with that, Sandy? How do you see that?
I'm actually going to tie this back to earlier. That question came up repeatedly about the need for reporting from a business. Businesses keep knocking on your door asking for reporting versus insights and analytics. And I'm going to speak purely from the business standpoint. We did need the reporting. We do need the reporting. And we can't go to the next phase till we solve the reporting. What is happening right now? That's what the approach that Naveen and team took about teaching our analysts, we call them analysts, and they are analysts, but how to use Tableau and giving us the visuals and the ability to solve that reporting question. So that would be my advice to everybody who was asking that. How do you solve for that? Their solution was actually a really good one because now we are able to deal with that ourselves from a business standpoint using Tableau. It's a double-edged sword, though, because we have our analysts constantly working on reports, just creating basic reports to solve for all the current business process needs. And it took us probably a year to solve the basic reporting needs. Excel spreadsheets are great, but it's a point in time, and that's all that gave us. What Tableau has given us is right now I can log in and see exactly what's going on right now. That was a huge step forward for us from a business standpoint and being able to see my funnel and what's happening at this very moment. We are now starting to talk about the future, and actually, I'm going to say not just the future, but analyzing, I guess, true analytics in my mind. Give me an insight I didn't know, and we're just starting to get to that. But it's going to be a struggle. In fact, I emailed Naveen just the other day going, how can you help us? Because we are filling up my business line, one analyst, and we've got him pulled in 25 different directions, and now we want more resources. So I do think it's something we're going to have to balance very carefully in that I could just keep asking questions, and you can keep giving me info. I'm going to have to make sure we have a disciplined approach, and I think that's going to be important from a business leader standpoint, is we make good decisions as to where we are spending our time, because I could easily take a team of 10 and just answer questions for me all day long or go find what I don't know, but does that really have any value? So I think really trying to hone into what do I need to know versus what's just interesting is going to be the next challenge for me and my business, and I'm assuming for Robin and her business.
Hear that, Hank? We need more analysts.
That was a key word, right? The balance. I think drawing the balance across the different teams and leveraging the synergies there. And I think I'll ask the same question to Juan. I think, do you see any such similar kind of scenarios? Like, do you have a team that's more focused around delivering analytics, and is there, a business team that's kind of working together, collaborating together?
Yes and no. We took the approach of centralizing a lot of the analysts that were in the lines of business a couple of years ago before I came. So BI at this point is, I would say, mostly centralized. We still have some independent analysts in the lines of business. I think because of the state of maturity of our data and our data governance, data quality process, I'm all in for self-service, right? But if you don't do it the right way with the right controls in place, it can also become the Wild West, and then you go back to the multiple answers, how many members did I get this month, 5 answers, and they're all right. So we will get back to that, but we need to establish some centralized controls and data governance and data quality in place until we go. So right now we're in the business of cleanup, building the infrastructure, But the way we're approaching our solutions are sort of across three lanes, right? Now that I have the right team in place and the right technology, now I can focus on doing some better data integration, better BI, and then doing analytical solutions on top of that. So I do have a data science in my organization, and we actually have data science providers can actually provide consulting services, and we are trying to build some predictive analytics solutions on top of the data we're integrating that is all aligned with the roadmap of value that we are uncovering with the lines of business. So it's trying to very quickly show value in the two lanes, the BI, the reporting, and the analytics, but also eventually with a goal of farming out the BI and focusing on the insight and the analytics. So it's a maturity process, and we're just starting, but that's how we are thinking about it.
All right, thanks. So one of the questions that I had on my mind I was going to ask was, with all the different tools that's come up, with all the different capabilities that's out there now, I think, how has things changed really? I mean, in your organization, I think I'll just ask Andre, did you see a big transformation or change as we start getting so many different tools, analytical tools?
Yeah, what I've seen that is happening in the marketplace is it looks like the large software corporations such as Oracle, IBM, and all those companies, what they're doing is they're trying to integrate 4 or 5 tools in one. So they're trying to make CRM, predictive analytics tool, a member engagement tool, and a reporting tool. So I think that in 2-3 years, what you're going to see is you're going to see one package, one software with multiple tabs, an interface in one place. That's what they're trying to do. All my market research vendors are trying to do that as well. So I think whoever does that well will succeed in our market, and I'll be one of the first ones on the line to purchase that tool. Because, it makes sense. One piece to integrate, multiple solutions, that's perfect. So right now, we have multiple solutions at my credit union. We have a specific BI department that is called BI that we're creating that concept. Then you have market research as well that, complement BI, and BI complements market research, and they have different tools, but they have similar purposes, which is, help the organization to be predictive, to provide insight at the strategic level, at the, the field, with the staff and all of that. So I have Integrator by Radom Financial Group. That tool is kind of getting outdated a little bit. The segmentation is really good. So the tool itself is flexible, but the segmentation is getting old. As we find out that more variables impact member behavior, aging income, what they purchase kind of doesn't cut anymore. You have to extend on that. So there is also MapInfo. I don't know if you guys know Pitney Bowes, Alteryx, somebody on Telco mentioned. Yeah, those are good tools, but there is better out there, such as some of the CRM tools I've seen from Oracle, IBM, and Natero. You guys are familiar with Natero? It's a startup company here in California. Actually, I'm meeting with them after this conference. They just designed a member success platform for credit unions. I will check it out, see what happens there.
Right. So I think I kind of asked a similar question to Dale. I mean, so how do you see at the Spokane? I mean, there's so many onslaught of tools that's there.
I think we've given up on any hope of standardizing across the enterprise. Everybody has their favorite tools, and if it's generating good insights and an analyst has a strong preference, came out of college with experience in one area or another, we do our very best to support that. We've got an enterprise solution that we're just implementing now, a brand new one from Information Builders, and it's a quality product, but we also have folks with Tableau licenses. We've got folks with Qlik licenses. We've got. I'm an RStudio guy, and so I'm crunching out my numbers with the R programming language. So we really try to support the analysts and let them drive the tool set. The more important challenge for us is cultivating that curiosity amongst the analysts to get past reporting and into insight generation, and where can you take the business to achieve our strategic objectives. And once you get that in their heads, then they're going to choose the tools that are going to help them the most. So that's been our approach.
So I think with that, I think I'll just open up for the audience to ask questions to the panelists.
For the gentleman that just spoke, when you were talking about using all the different platforms, how do you ensure data integrity when you're allowing all these different programs to be running simultaneously?
They all source one common repository of data. So it's been cleansed. We've had the ETL applied to it. It's all modeled. So regardless of how you want, what tool you want to use to slice and dice it, we have the data integrity of sourcing one single repository of data, and we do our best with that. Now, analysts go rogue all the time and say, well, this is how I want to define this measure or this metric or things like that. That creativity, sometimes brings us to a new insight or a new corporate standard of understanding behavior or whatever it is. We don't discourage it. So we've got multiple definitions of what it is to be a member. We've got multiple definitions of which channels, what activity is through what channels. And the organization, while that's frustrating for the organization, it also helps us mature even faster by letting those ideas compete. So, is that a crazy answer?
I have a question for you. You said you're catering a lot of tools.
I'm sorry?
You're catering a lot of tools.
Yeah.
But you're solving the purpose of what he said was how do you definitions and all that. But won't administration of these tools be a challenge?
Well, if we take ownership of that, I suppose, but certainly if you have competent people, competent analysts that know their tools and have a strong reason for adopting a particular tool set, and they can take ownership over their own support, then let them run with it. If there's a concern about that, well, then we have our enterprise platform to steer them towards where they can expect a higher level of enterprise support.
Yeah, my point is there are two types of challenges. The other type is adoption challenge. There are like 10 tools in the company. What is the tool that me as a user, which tool should I choose? Does it depend on, because at the same time you're saying all of them are sourcing from the same data source.
Sure.
So what is the tool that you suggest a user to use?
Sure. The default is the enterprise tool set. But if they have a compelling reason to, if that's not serving a particular need and they know that and they're savvy enough to understand the advantages of one particular tool over another, we do give them some latitude.
And if I can follow up, on the First Tech side, it kind of sounds a little bit like we're Tableau salesmen up here. And I don't want to give that impression because we do have analysts who are using R, and I've been playing around with using Python, and dare I say, I still use Excel to do analysis. So I think the key is really about the data structure. The data infrastructure is really the key. And whatever tool that you decide to use, that's the tool that works for you. And Tableau is something that's working for us across the organization, but it's really an individual thing. So I think that's a great point.
One of the things that I'll be talking about tomorrow is a certification process. So if someone wants to use some tool that they like, as long as you can certify it, that's fine. It has to be supported properly. They have to be able to maintain it. It has to be able to provide the necessary goodness of data, et cetera. If it does that, there's no argument.
Well, what I've found is the follow-up question anytime data analysis is shared is, okay, how can I get to that? I want that. I want this updated. And that's you're right about, we're not here on a Tableau sales trip, but that's the value it's brought to me is great. Somebody publish it, and here's the spot, and you can go look at it whenever you want. That's from a business standpoint, we're able, business owner to business owner, talk apples to apples. If we're using the exact same source and tool, it's been very helpful. We bypass the arguments about, well, what'd you use? How'd you use it? Well, how are you showing it? How'd you calculate it? So it saves us time on that. Mm-hmm.
I think Eric talked about one of the challenges that people have is in definitions, and I think people talked about members, and I think everybody can raise their hand that there's been a time where somebody has defined a member as this versus that. Do you guys set up in your, let's use member for example, have you set up key definitions? When we say member, we're meaning voting member, we're meaning household member, or we mean anybody that breathes, or we mean, you know, how have you guys set that up to where you're consistent? Because that's the challenge we have is we'll get 3 reports about our financials and ratios, and if they use the wrong member, it throws everything off.
It's one of the only variables I think that we kind of decided on with executive sponsorship. You know, we define a member as somebody who has a unique Social Security number, has $5 in an open savings account, meaning a share. You know, and so that's a voting member. So that's a member. So everybody knows how to report on a member. Now, in regards to household, that gets a little more complicated because the only system that generates right now a household is in market research, and it's called the integrated system, where, you know, we household all the data and pops it out the households. People believe in the data; it is accurate, but, you know, when you deal with data, you're always going to have a 1 to 5% margin of error, no matter what you do. It's never be exact. So you kind of got to work on that. Convincing people around that that's okay to deal with that margin.
Actually, I think, Hemant, given that you have been leading the data governance, and can you talk more about how we are trying to solve that particular problem by having a catalog on the wiki?
That's right. So I think just to add to what Naveen was asking about is, so we do have a common page, the wiki page, where we kind of log all the different business catalog definitions, so that it's visible to all the business units, so that they can chime in with any additional definitions of what they use and update it as going. It's like an ongoing process, but we try to capture most of the commonly used terms to avoid that confusion saying, what's the definition of a member? Not to get 5 different answers, but try to at least put it out there and say, this is what the member is.
So one question that I have for you is, like, how do you really engage with the business, and especially when engaging with the line of business leaders, like, for example, in our case, Sandy, Dave, or Robin? A lot of times what I see is that the analysts who are working in the line of businesses, they hear the requirements and then they go ahead and start providing those reports and dashboards without really understanding the objectives of what Sandy is really trying to achieve, what Robin is really trying to achieve. And in that case, what happens is it takes a lot of cycles before they come out with something meaningful that the leaders can take action on. So how do you really get over that part where it is not like you are just listening to the leaders and developing some reports, but really having a consultative approach, trying to understand what you are trying to really achieve, and then provide a meaningful, more like an objective way to come to the data? How do you really achieve those kind of things in your organizations?
So I'll start. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I needed to come and address when I joined the organization. My team was a BI team that was very focused on transactional reporting, right? So my team, people would go to my team with a mock-up of a report, and my team would deliver exactly that mock-up of the report. But never a question was asked is, what do you do with this afterwards? And you know, when we start asking those questions, well, I take the report you give me, I dump it into Excel, then I join it through VLOOKUPs into these 6 data sets, and then I produce a final pivot table that's, oh, well, I could have given you that had you told me. Well, you didn't ask, right? So training my team and getting the right resources in my team to be able to have those like head-to-head conversations with C-level executives all the way down. It was one of the key assets that I focus a lot of effort in finding the right resource, right? And some of the rules we put is it's okay when we're starting to talk about information requirements. On purpose, I didn't call it reporting requirements. It's information requirements. What questions are you trying to answer? What are your business purpose? What are your goals? It forces my team, to your point, become a more consultative organization, right, in terms of understanding really what you're trying to accomplish, right? And it forces the business to also talk down or sort of simplify what we're trying to do. So we have a full methodology that we take basically all those questions, we decompose them into their data elements, we basically read back to the business, this is what we heard and we're trying to accomplish. And it's all in writing. There's no mock-ups, there's no data elements, there's no, and we are, by doing that, we're elevating the conversation to what is the information? What are the insights, right? And in those questions, there's all sorts of elements. There's things that you can deliver quickly in a report. We found that after a meeting that we had with the business, with the finance team, half an hour later, we had produced a report that saved them but we knew the context, we knew exactly the value of what it was. We have come out with projects that are going to require us to build, profit allocation models and then cost allocation models. It will take us months to build. But again, the key is to elevate the conversation, right? And it takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of education because the first thing that people say when I talk about BI, the first thing that customers want to bring is a list of reports they want to automate. And I say that's okay. Let's put those aside. Educate me, right? Tell me what you're trying to accomplish, right? So that's my point of view, and I think it's working well so far. It's allowing us to add value. And something you mentioned this morning as well is a consultative approach, right? We had it a couple of weeks ago in which we were delivering a release one of my BI 2.0 program, and we were able to actually add a few elements that the business hadn't thought about. Like, hey, if you see this data differently and we added these other metrics, this is exactly how you can better track what you're trying to do. But it all came from my business, from my team, because my team was able to sort of step up and take a value-add approach, not just a report delivery type of approach.
I think it depends on the leader that you're working with. Some are very open to that consultation. Others, you have to resign yourself that this is going to be an iterative thing, 2 or 3 or 4 swings at this before we get what's really going to work for that leader, because they need to see it one step at a time. So I think it just, you're facing a whole range of different engagement styles within an organization.
Yeah, for me, I was lucky enough that at least with my team, I was able to hire the people. I didn't inherit anybody. So during the talent acquisition, I developed a couple of interview methods there that I could really drill down into the person's brain and way of thinking. So, they had that consultancy approach built into them. So it made my life easier. So when I hire them, that's what they do. They come across as a consultant, a strategist, not a data scientist or data analyst, but more of as a strategist. So they go to all the chiefs and they ask, okay, for example, lending, so what is the business problem here? And lending comes to us and says, well, we want to migrate the indirect household. We have a lot of indirect lending or credit. You make tons of money through that channel. So we want to migrate the indirect household to a retail status. We want to engage that member. So a report won't cut it. So my strategist has to come back to the team and we strategize, you create a strategic plan for the internal client. And then we'll go back and say, okay, this is what we can do for you, in terms of market research, in terms of using the member success team to execute on the data and so forth. So it's more, I think, that you guys said the same thing in different words. It's pretty much the mentality of the leader in the area, how he's coaching the people to kind of be a consultant rather than a report writer or a BI analyst.
Another question, actually, another thing that I see within organization in bits and pieces is that a lot of times when the leaders, the business function leaders are giving the requirements to the analysts, for whatever reason, the analysts hear a lot of things and they think that all of them are high priority. And what happens in that case is that they start working on a lot of things, and at the end of the day, not much is achieved, which leads to kind of dissatisfaction from the leader saying, it has been a month or a quarter and I've not really seen anything. So what we are trying to discipline within our business functions is how they can actually use the agile process. Maybe have that conversation with the leaders to say, out of those 10 things that I've heard, what is the highest priority for you? So that we can work on one thing, deliver it in a sprint or 2 sprints, and then move on to something else. Do you see any challenges like that? And maybe, Sandy, why don't you talk about your experience? And then we can maybe go to Dale and Juan and Ray.
But this kind of ties back a little bit to the basic reporting needs need to be met. So if there's something going on or the house is on fire from a business perspective, and just a little bit of perspective, I have something like 8 or 9 departments, 28 products, 5 programs, managing 8 channels. So if the house is on fire, we got to figure out what's going on right now. And that's kind of that whole credit union thing where if there's a problem, the analysts are being used for, okay, go in and get me that report. I need that report. I think from a business perspective, kind of going back to the how do we be very, very effective, is the education is absolutely right, because it's part of it is what are we doing? Data analytical insight, I don't want to say is new. We've always wanted it, but actually having the talent in-house to deliver it is somewhat new. So part of it is the education over and over. And another part is bring something back to me. I'm just going to say it honestly. Bring something back. Bring me something I didn't expect. Give me a date that I will have something. There's a lot of people who come to me or my management team and want stuff. Very few give it back. So that's the best way to get buy-in from me is give me something. Tease me a little bit, and then I'm in.
Do you want to add to that, Dale?
Sure. It's a skill that executives have to learn, that they ask $5 questions that take $500 answers, that just take a very disproportionate amount of resources to solve what may be to them a fairly trivial challenge, but they have this resource and they're going to put it to work. It really is part of the challenge of good communication between the analysts and the leaders to say, I appreciate your interest in that area. We can do that the light version or the giant version, and really help educate them into just the impact it's going to have on the analytical resources to help calibrate their expectations accordingly. So many times the leaders, when they go, wow, if I knew it was going to take your team 3 weeks and this many hundreds of hours, I would have never asked the question. And so you have to give them the opportunity to just calibrate their expectations.
Yeah, I would say the same. Yep, because we will. I mean, we're in sales. We want to know. We want it all. But we have to trust the analyst to speak honestly. This is my first opportunity that I've had an analyst at my beck and call, and again, I want it all, and I trust him to say, to your point, it's going to be this or it's going to be this, and how do you want this in order? So it is necessary that y'all speak up. And then I think it only takes one time to spend a month on a report that we didn't need after all before you realize you're not going to do that again. So yeah.
So how do you chime into that? I mean, when there's such multiple priorities coming in.
No, I think what's been mentioned is exactly the right approach. I think the other way is to we use a portfolio approach in terms of understanding what's the business value of this will drive. So the question I ask my customers is, if I give you this, what are you going to do differently? How is this going to improve? What is the business impact? Is it a cost reduction? Is it additional? What is it? Let's put a placeholder in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. But then the other dimension is complexity, right? Some of these things are going to be, as mentioned before, extremely complex, right? So that puts it in the top sort of right quadrant, and that's going to take a long time. So how do we break it into pieces? And what I'm telling my customers a lot is like, I can give you something that is probably 60% cooked in the next 3 weeks, or I can give you 100% in the next 6 months. That's your call, right? Mm-hmm. So many times they end up going, okay, I prefer something that works, that is not maybe 100% cooked, but that it works in the short term, and then we keep iterating, then it just goes down. So it's a lot of it, and I think something's mentioned is just commit and deliver, right? And keep the partners engaged and tell them how you're delivering and what things are progressing. And I think that's, but you need to put in terms of trade-offs and value as well. So that's what we're applying, and so far it's working well. I think Evan Levy, one of the things he said is that you in the BI space, you're going to become a manager of disappointment, right? Because you're going to have to manage a lot of disappointment from, I cannot give you everything you want, but I can give you some of the things that you really want. And what are you going to choose, right? That's, I think, the key is balancing those two things out.
Do you see the same, Andre?
Yeah, I see the same. I use two techniques, very basic, very blah, but it always works. So when you look at Stephen Covey, when you look at urgent and importance matrices, that works perfectly for my team. A lot of times you're working on things, my analysts are working on things that are urgent but not important. So for example, we have a merger and acquisition plan. There's a lot of business intelligence market research you have to do in a plan like that. And that's at the strategic level. Is that urgent? No. Is that important? Yes. And then you have a report with not a whole lot of analytics that you have to produce for business development to pay commission on. That's important and urgent. So we work on that one first. So that's kind of how we go about.
Any more questions in the audience?
Okay. I have a couple of questions about first, risk management, fraud detection. Any of you doing your own fraud detection, specifically patterns for fraud, not specific one, but patterns for it, okay? Or you outsourcing it usually. We can do either way, but what's your experience? And second question would be, we keep hearing about this big and beautiful word, big data and Hadoop, okay? It's not always needed, okay? Not at all. We have tons of information, tons of data, and we can go back, look at snapshots. We have trends and patterns, anything. We don't use Hadoop. I don't see any need for it, for our size at least, okay? So did you see, if any of you, I do not know what size of data sets you're dealing with, at which point you said, yep, we cannot manage any more with regular relational databases. We're going to go with Hadoop cluster. Okay, did you have that experience? Does it make sense?
I think there are two parts to that question. I think one regarding the fraud, as was the other one was more from the word big data, right? So I think maybe Dale. I'll start with you.
Sure. On the fraud question, I think it depends on your particular credit union's experience. We have very low fraud losses, and so that's not been a priority. But if a credit union, I would say if a credit union has substantial fraud challenges, losses, that is one of the very first places to go. Fraud losses and credit losses, that's the quickest ROI to a business intelligence program you'll ever find. So that might be one of your very first areas to tackle, because stopping that bleeding can be a huge gain. If it's a modest thing, well, then the solution gets calibrated to an outsource or a packaged solution that you just plug in and manage the losses that your credit union experiences. With big data, we've got 5, 6, 10 years of straight full-on running with small data before we worry about unstructured data or data so large that it won't work in relational databases. Certainly the tools that we have to work with can manage millions and millions of transaction records, and we've got a lot of work to do in terms of that, whether you call it small data or medium data. We're a long ways away from working with click streams or email text or those types of things. So until we get, I've got to say, what's the low-hanging fruit? Reaching into those MapReduce realms or working with the structured data that you already have. And for us, it's certainly the latter.
So one
So from as to the fraud question, we have moderate levels of fraud, especially because of the markets we serve. We have some basic off-the-shelf tools that we purchased last year that we're looking at, but we definitely, fraud is something that has come up in the roadmap. As I've been working with the chief risk officer, is something we want to tackle relatively soon. We didn't have the infrastructure or the capabilities to do something, but we have them now. We're starting to work on that. It will probably be later this year that we'll start tackling it. What we have right now is good, good enough to help us, but to Dale's point, there's plenty of benefit if we tackle it in a much more structured way, much more detail. Not only external fraud, but also working with my internal audit team, there's a lot of opportunities to tackle some of the internal audits and internal fraud that is happening in the organization. Again, not alarming, but it's a potential source of value. As with big data, I have issues with that term, with that definition. I think that's something that vendors push to get companies to buy what seem to be the silver bullet. You all may have seen the big data definition that is doing the rounds in LinkedIn. It's like teenage sex. That well, I won't get into that, but to me, big data is all relative to the what would your is relative. The big data term is relative to your ability to do something with it, right? Right now, we have plenty of data that if you look at the hardcore definition of big data, is small data, but we can't have a full view of our members, right? We can't process, so that to me seems to be like a big data. I mean, we are dealing with data sets we can't control, and these are all things that fit in for a couple of terabytes of data, right? So it's all relative, right? I think, there's some structured data and all sorts of things, but we think we have plenty of data to act on. It's more about extracting the value out of it and doing something with the data you have at hand. So yeah, that's my take.
So I can also speak on the fraud detection patterns, like give you a few examples that we are doing at First Tech. So one of them is tracking on the IP addresses. So if we know that the fraud has happened in the past from that particular IP address, then we flag those. So we have like more than 350 IP addresses that are flagged all over the US. So that one kind of pattern we look for. Another one that is interesting is the tax refund. So if somebody has more than two or more than two state tax refund or a federal tax refund, so those kind of patterns we also track. So those are the two examples that we have been working on with the fraud team.
At First Tech, we're also using a product called Toolcase. Yes.
Alchemy, right?
No. I can't think of the.
Informant, you mean?
Informant.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Informant, where we feed it all of our core transactions and our credit card and our debit card transactions, and it's kind of our first line of defense. So we write the rules. It picks up the patterns, but it's designed for the business to write the rules. So it's doing the analytics for us. And then obviously we use Falcon from our core processors as the second line of defense.
Any more questions? There's a question there in the back.
I can yell. Okay. To decentralize business analysts, it's an idea I like. We're very centralized right now because I'm working on that governance strategy of people understanding what they can see and what the definitions are. So we're on that path. How do you manage, though? I know you guys talked about collaborating together and sharing Tableau links and reports, which I think is great. But how do you manage not having duplicity within what you're reporting within the different areas, and then the pipeline of the requests, not just within the different analyst groups, but also up into the BI analyst world?
Did you have that question to any specific panelist?
I don't have a specific question to a specific person. Just managing the request is a big challenge for us in terms of having a platform to be able to see how priorities change and the shifting of that. So.
Sure.
Exactly, I was thinking. Like how we prioritize in our Scrum, like how we involve our.
Sorry, I didn't look into the question. Yeah, so in digital analytics, what we do for the first layer of Agile is to have our vision. So if you have a project or if you have a product, what's the vision of that? A one-word simple line.
So once you have that vision, we broke that vision into the product roadmap. So at quarter-wise or on monthly basis, we should have a product or project roadmap. So once we have the roadmap, like on the quarterly basis, we have for the data warehouse. So once we have that, we split that roadmap into the epics. So which is an agile term we use into the Scrum. So epic is a kind of a big story. So like, we have different stories we tell our kids. So it's I would say the name of the story. So once you have the story, you should know what is happening in that story, where the story is going, and once you know the details of that story, you should know when it's ending. The story should end. So we shall have the vision, we have the product roadmap, and then we have the epics, and then every sprint we break those epics into the story points. So that's how we are, planning our roadmap, and we are, doing our step-by-step baby steps on the agile form, and we are trying to go into where our project is going. I hope that answers your question.
That was the macro level.
Yeah.
It's really more on the micro side of
how you prioritize it.
I'm getting 50 requests every day.
So
and understanding how to manage.
Yeah. So you for the prioritization, you need to understand what the value is going on. What business really looking into that? Is there a value? If you don't do it, is business going to lose their market or something? If we do it, what is the prioritization? So if there are 10 things, what is the highest priority? If we don't do it, what is the risk involved on it? So if there is a risk involved in, is this something new we are doing it? How much effort we are putting it? So there are a lot of things we look into it, and then we prioritize it.
I would say that having the decentralized is a great way to go for us, because Sandy and I each think very strongly about what our needs are, and they're equal as far as we're concerned. It removes that. I think from the enterprise projects are with Naveen's team and such, and those are pretty much lined out and stack ranked already as to what the priority is. Then we've got our own analysts that can handle our individual urgent needs. So it removes that thing that you're encountering.
I play in both pools, and that's a little tough.
Yeah, and I think, go ahead, Dave, please.
I was going to echo what Robin was saying, that I think that helps with the problem, but then that creates the issue of having duplicate reports, right? And so I think that, though, is not a real problem for us. And so, for example, in credit analytics, I'm looking at origination trends, and you guys are also looking at origination trends, but they're from different perspectives, and I think that actually helps. So I don't think it's as duplicative as it looks.
I think that they're more supporting it, but mine might be from a marketing perspective. He's looking from the credit risk perspective, and then put them together, and you've got a great picture.
And I think another thing that we do is, or we attempt to do is, that how can we really plan the roadmap from the strategic perspective so that we have the things which are really important. And when we look at the priorities, it is not like we are defining those priorities in vacuum. We work very closely with the business team. So say, for example, when we are working on the data warehouse, Dave's priority is our priority. There have been instances where Dave has said, you know what, I want this and this and this. And we asked Dave, have this conversation, can we do it in next phase? What can we really want to do now? What can we?
My answer is usually no.
Just kidding. So have those conversations. At the same time, in each sprint, we set aside some time, because there are going to be either some bugs which come up in the process, or there may be some ad hoc requests which come in. But the whole idea is that the transparency. I think one of the things that we promote within us is that we actually put our roadmap and we put it on Wiki. And I don't know whether Sandy, Robin, you have really seen that roadmap that we put on Wiki, but let's take this as an opportunity to say that, okay, we are trying to put everything out in the open so business knows what we are working on. If they think that there is something else which is important, then the conversation is not so much about whether we should do this or not, but it is more about, okay, if we do this, what can we really drop, right? Because there is only so much bandwidth you have as a team, and it is good to have those conversations, because it automatically leads to having that prioritization and that exercise?
Two other quick ideas to that. One is we ask all of our analysts to write up a quick little, to put into a form and a populated table with just basics of the reports that they're building and publishing, so that another analyst can, before they start work on anything, scan down the list and make sure it isn't already done, or a start to the plan that they want isn't already well underway. So it saves them, brings a little efficiency that way. We also have monthly Power User Analyst meetings where we get together and talk about best practices. We talk about new data and changes to data, and also talk about what we're working on that's innovative. And it also brings a level of communication amongst all the analysts to know what would be novel versus what's already well-established research.
Yeah.
I hope that answered. I mean, I think just quickly, I think there are two approaches, right? One is a long-term solution, and then the other one is a short-term. I think working with the business continuously, I think that's what Naveen was referring to. Any other questions in the audience?
I have a question actually. So although we believe in data-driven culture, and I think that's why we all are here, but is it okay to sometimes make a decision without backing it with data? And in what situation? And have you ever taken that? It's an open question. Yeah.
Depends on the cost.
Yes, if it's a decision of right or wrong. And quite frankly, member-based decisions are very easy to make. It's right or it's wrong. It's when it's an impact decision, then I need data. I need data, and I need a look back and projections forward.
Agreed.
You know, we people who love data, we tend to say that everything is in the data, every answer is in the data. That's really not true. You know, it is maybe 70 or 80% of the time, but a lot of times the data doesn't show you other elements of the situation, of the business question, such as, you know, the politics involved with certain transactions and things like that, or the human element is involved in that. So I think as a leader, you need to remember when complementing that data with your intuition and who you are, you need to know how to make that decision, because it happens more often than you would like to admit.
Yeah, and it's not even in the absence of data. It's maybe sometimes going against what the data is indicating, and you still have to determine if you want to make that decision.
The other thing, I'm in R&D, and a lot of times when you're talking about innovations, you've got no experience to draw on. And so you have to do market acceptance testing and reach out for the data that you're going to make judgments on, but it's not something that you have readily. And if it's too expensive, if it's too much of a stretch to get the data, you just have to make a call. You have to use judgment.
Did Dave have anything to add to it? Or?
I would agree. I think that I just find it hard to imagine not having any data at all, honestly. So
He's kind of struck numb here.
Maybe that's because I'm too much of a numbers guy. But I think that there's always some sort of benchmark you can find. It may not be exactly what you're looking for, but I kind of do find it hard to imagine a situation where you're in complete darkness. Now, the innovative R&D, that may be the exception, but I think it's incumbent upon us to drive our decisions with as much data as we can find, and then to understand the limitations of that data, which then drives the limitations of our ability to use that data. But I just don't think it's black and white, I guess, is all I'm getting at. It's kind of either you've got a lot or a little. And if you got a lot, you feel good. Got a little, you take the risk.
Yeah, I think that the last point about the black and white is a key point about that question, right? It's not neither extreme is good, right? Like, 100% gut feeling decisions, well, that may be in R&D, but at some point you'll need data. And then also this notion that, machine learning will take over the world, and then everybody will lose our jobs. That's also, I think, naive or not possible. So it's a balance, right? And a lot of things that what happens, I think, like, and before leading the team at Partners, I was with Disney, led several different analytical teams at Disney, and we came across that notion of a lot of key operators making decisions on what seemed to be gut feeling, but in reality, where it's a bunch of fine-tuned business rules they had in their heads, that had been fine-tuned over time, with just some basic data elements they could see. So a manager of an attraction at Disney can know that if it's a X thousands of people attendance day and it's sunny, he can expect X number of people in his attraction, and he knows that because he's been running the attraction for 20 years, right? So it's a bunch of business rules and data elements in his head that are basically it's not gut feeling, it's just fine-tuned experience. So there is data on what seemed to be gut feeling decision making. I think the challenge is how do you the proposition to him in that case, or to those people in that case, well, we can actually help you make faster decisions better, more inputs, and get you out of that. So again, no extreme is good, I think it's just making sure that you have the right balance and what to use when.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So I think in one of the previous questions, I kind of sensed what success meant, like in a few of the statements, but I just want to go across and ask, how do you define success in your own areas?
In my area, success is growing a very profitable and well-performing portfolios of my products.
So I think the answer is we manage and mitigate the credit risk. But, if I think more broadly about just analytics in terms of what success means, I think different people have said it different ways. But when we talk about analytics, it's really a process, right, that starts with data collection, data structure. You split that data up into as many slices and dices as you can. Then you pull it together into a story, and then that culminates with options. And that's what I try and tell my analysts, is that your job is to provide options for senior leadership to make some sort of decision. And to me, we're being a successful team if we can say, here are the 3 different choices you have, and this is what will happen. If you choose A, this is what will happen. If you choose B, this is what will happen if you choose C, so that we can all become much better, much more informed decision makers.
To me, it would be taking all the data we have available to offer the best product, the best pricing to the members, meeting the expectations of growth for the credit union, and ending it all with a strong NPS score, a happy member, and a happy employee. That's the ultimate picture for me.
With R&D, the challenge is taking the 100 good ideas that we get every single month and winnowing them down to the 10 that we can actually do. So it's choosing an analysis that kills an idea as quickly as you possibly can, and get it out of the way, throw it to the curb, and then focus the organization's energy on the handful that survive that process and really bring value to members.
So to me, in my role, then success is about, are we truly managing data as an asset? Am I enabling my peers to be able to make more data-driven decisions, analytics-driven decisions? Right? I was having this conversation with a board member a few weeks ago, and he was asking me, how can you show value? What are you? I say, well, to a great degree, success will be when my peers talk about how better decisions they can make and how much better, faster insights can, and that's, I'm an enabler of, so that success is how much value can I enable on my peers and the rest of the organization.
In an abstract form, I'm responsible for helping the organization to become a predictive enterprise through data analysis. Now, in a real numbers world, in a more concrete piece, I'm looking at a decrease of 12% on member churn. migrate 18% of our indirect households to retail status, increase lifetime member tenure by 12.15%, and increase member engagement by 10%. Member engagement we define as core products being sold. And all of those metrics are connected to analyzing data, generating predictive analytics models, and utilizing intelligence for action.
Right. Thank you. So I think so this is discussion. Any last questions to from the audience before we wrap up? So I think the topic that we kind of went through is. Oh, is there a question? Evan?
One question, and that's, at some point you reach from information, from data that you can use to data clutter, where you just have too much competing information or stuff that's stale, et cetera. How do you deal with that?
By asking the right questions. You start there. So the brain behind in this case, you would think would be us here, would be the brains behind the unit. You would start there, asking the right questions. What drives the business? What are the data elements that drive revenue or the potential for revenue, the opportunity, and you start there. And then that looking at, that's not the case, but let's assume it is, looking at credit card transactions, for example, would not be important. And then you cut that out of the process of getting to the answer. That's how I see it.
I agree. I think when BI or data or analytics projects are not business driven, but they are more technology or source data driven, that's when you get cluttered. Because in a company I cannot name, there was this huge data warehouse that was building a Teradata platform. Basically, the approach was just dump everything in it, right? All sources, just dump it in Teradata, and something good will come out. If we push hard enough, something good will come on the other side, right? Nobody used it, right? Because again, it was this notion of the building that will come, and people don't come. So that's what, in my opinion, that's when you get data cloud. It's so big and so complex that people, we joke that actually Business Object was the most used ETL tool in the company because people would build Business Object reports on top of that data warehouse to dump it into Access to then do the true analytics, right? But it all starts from not asking the right questions, right? What is the business value? Like right now, we're building a release 2 of Channel Analytics. It's 6 data points, right? And that will give the chief member services officers, months upon months of value, and it's just 6 data points. Now, there are 6 pretty hard data points to integrate and make together, but again, it's what he needs for now, right? And when he gets that, he'll have more questions, and then we can, tackle those there. So it's that balance between what's the business value, how do you get the data together, what are you going to do with this? And not just, I think a lot of the clutter comes also from lack of trust between business and BI or IT teams. When if this is my only chance to get something out of UBI, I'm going to ask for anything and everything, right? Just throw everything in that, because if this is my only chance around, I'll just give me everything, right? And then that puts a burden on business teams to make sense out of that data and that insight, right? So that's my experience, and I think again comes back to: are you mature enough as a BI organization to ask the right questions, to understand what the business is trying to accomplish, and to elevate and step up to the plate?
Well, I agree exactly with that. In fact, that is probably the best measure of the maturity of the analytics of an organization. It's not the question of how good are you at answering questions. It's how good are you at asking good questions. And that really, it takes experience, and that's where the years pay dividends in formulating well, Einstein said it, didn't he? He said, if I had 1 hour to come up with the solution to a question that my life depended on, I'd spend 55 minutes of the hour formulating the question and just 5 minutes actually crunching out the answers. So I think that's certainly the model for us all.
Yeah, I agree. Asking the right questions is really the key to this. And as kind of the user of the data, if there's a lot of data clutter, I'm not going to use it, like you said. And so it's really more about that partnership and that consultative nature that we've talked about that is really, I think, key. And honestly, it's a challenge. You know, we sit here and we are naturally going to create our silos, right? That's not something that you break down once and is gone forever. That's like a perpetual process, and really it involves a partnership across the organization in lots of different ways.
All right. Any more questions? All right, so I think I just want to quickly say I think everybody were echoing the same fact. I think it's the business value that's really the key there, having that constant engagement with the business. And I think we saw that even in the prior presentation that Naveen talked about. And I think that's the key. That's what all of you have mentioned. And I think that's a great takeaway for the audience. And I think once we are through that, I think that's where the technology comes in and the people and the rest. So we talked quite a lot about different areas, about doing a balancing act as well, how to prioritize and which ones to really need to be focused in terms of addressing the business needs. Tools, we talked about different tools, which one better suits to your company needs, and that's one of the other elements as well. So I just want to take this moment to thank all the distinguished panelists here. It was my honor to have a chat with you all. Thank you, everybody.